Okay. Just getting a little vibe going. So I want to just talk about a few things in music. In my own journey, I've done a lot of different things in the music industry, and I've tried to be a lot of different sort of modalities. And my career started early doing well, and I was, I had a huge record deal when I was 20 years old, and publishing, and we started companies, and I went to Juilliard, and a lot of, sort of positive things. Beyond that, I made sort of every mistake you could make in this business. So more than me coming on and advising you or telling you what you should do, I might be a good person to ask what you shouldn't do. The first thing I want to sort of bring up is the idea of authenticity and finding your own personal style, like looking for your voice. And I feel like as an artist, you're constantly searching for that voice and trying to find who you are and how to represent it. And I don't feel like I'm always up to the task of being creative or providing for your recording session. And I've played on over 100 records, but usually when somebody calls me to play on something, it's because they want me, not just because they want a violin or a bass guitar. And so I feel like I've lost a lot of gigs and a lot of opportunities because of that. At the same time, the gigs I do have, and playing with somebody like Jonathan Davis, the singer from Korn, and with Herbie Hancock, and Peter Murphy, of course, Psychic TV, Genesis Peorage, Kurt Schale, people like that. I'm only called for those things because it's because of expressing, because they want my voice. And if you call me in and it's like a lot of sight reading and very specific stylistically, I might be like, hey, that's not my gig, and I could farm it out to somebody else, and I'd be happy to do that. And I like doing that kind of work. I think it's important to identify your creative process and what sort of gets you in the mood. If you need the candles and the incense or whatever it is. I like to focus a lot on improvisation and interdisciplinary collaboration, meaning working with artists, dancers, poets, maybe taking a small film clip and doing an improvisation based on that. Or I might ask you to do like the John Cage kind of thing where we'll hold up a card with triangles, circles, infinity sign, whatever kind of symbolism, and make interpretation of that, or a poem. Interdisciplinary collaboration. And I've been very fortunate to work with some really amazing visual artists. And I think maybe that's part of why Art for Progress is something that I got involved in. Because I've always loved playing at the galleries and the poetry slams and stuff like that. With business in my career, I started with a record deal and a publishing deal. And we bought a studio and opened a studio, and we bought a truck and a van and started renting those things out. So I found all these other avenues of business. And I'm not recommending that you don't stay focused, but diversification is important. If you can teach, if you can do sessions, if you can do production of different sorts. A bunch of my career has been involved in live music production and event production. And I've toured with a lot of hip hop people. I work for Hot 97 almost every year. I do Summer Jam or one of those things as a production and stage manager. And that's just because I was in the studio business, and my manager at the time was involved in that scene, and we were producing hip hop records in our studio, and we started our label. And, I've always had that other sort of diversification in business. And so I've been fortunate to tour not only as a musician, as a musical director, but also as a production manager with people like Nicki Minaj and Lil Wayne, which is very different than going out and playing with the godfather of goth or some like free jazz music and stuff like that. But I feel like the authenticity and finding your own voice is important, because it's, at the end of the day, creativity and being an artist is something you have like a need and a thing you have to do as an artist. And that's what's going to make you happy when you're on your deathbed and you're looking back at what you did all this time. And did you bring somebody, did you pull somebody up? Did you inspire somebody? Did you make something great? Did you make yourself happy? And are you living a life that you love to live? And I'm saying that you can do that and be successful in business at the same time. And I think that's kind of the crux of what I wanted to say, or what I wanted to bring up as far as authenticity and the creative process, improvising, collaborating, business diversity, and ultimately living a creative, fulfilled life.
It's interesting, Zeph.
Yes.
May I ask a question or sort of?
No, I think I'm done ranting. I think I'm done talking. Thank you.
So, well, we have a little more time to talk, so let's get into it. So you said that you can, on your deathbed, feel like you accomplished something, that you lifted some people up, that you made something great, that you lived the life that you want to live, and that you have happiness. Those five things are all very worthy goals. We talked a lot about earlier about motivation and about like what, why we do it and all that stuff. But then you said you can actually do all those things and be successful in business. Whereas I think that our general idea in the society is those things are success, right? And then it turns out, however, that success in business sometimes precludes a lot of those levels of satisfaction. So can you talk a little bit about how you've been able to weave the two together?
Cool. I think, I mean, how we judge success might not be financial, and I think in our society, a lot of people do. And a lot of musicians and artists, sort of bemoan the fact that they don't make a living doing their art. And I don't always make a living doing my art, but I use what I can to sort of integrate it. So, I mean, an example would be, working for a band like Dirty Projectors, who I basically came on as a production manager. And the only way I can use what I learned as a musician for them is to kind of put myself in their position and try and understand or try and get a feeling of what's going to make their show smooth, or what's going to make their day smooth, or what would I want as an artist. And you kind of, have to detach your ego from that to some degree, to sense to sense what the other is experiencing and how to translate it, based on what you know. And I can do that only because I've been doing it a long time, and I'm older than those guys, and I've been doing it longer. Kind of just separate myself from the gig, so to speak.
I'm gathering that maybe the gig isn't everything that you thought it was, or you're having to act differently or do different things or be creative in a different way than you expected or than you like to. Is that what you're saying about that gig?
Yeah, and I was just using that as an example, but I think in general, as as creative people, we have to you have to flow and be adaptable, to the situation, and maybe not attach so much importance to it that, like, oh, it has to be exactly as I think it is. I mean, I'm not saying you can't do that. Like, some people are very good at, orchestrating exactly, what their livelihoods and what their, job and gig are. But, I think the adaptability is part of the creative process.
Yeah. Yeah. We talked, what was that just reminded me of something that we talked about yesterday. Yeah, adaptability. We talked a lot about ego. We talked about also, like, when do you take a gig and when do you turn a gig down? When do you do a gig even though you're not getting paid right for it? When do you turn a gig down even though you are getting paid right for it?
Yeah.
Stuff. So how do you go about making those decisions in your life?
Usually I make it emotionally or, gut. You guys were talking about playing on films. Maybe it was last week, but I had this experience where I went in and did a session. I got called for this session at the last minute, many years ago, back in the 90s, and I was not sober when I showed up. And I went into the studio and I played for a couple of hours, just improvised a bunch of stuff. A year later, the guy calls me and he's like, "We're going to go on the Jay Leno show and do the song." And I was like, "What's going on?" And it turned out it was a huge, it won an award, and it was like a big Volkswagen commercial. And he had sold 1 million copies of it, or whatever. This is back in 2000. But the melody, I had improvised this melody, and he hired an orchestra to play it. He just orchestrated a melody that I improvised over a beat that he made. He paid me $1,500, and I signed a release when I walked in the door that I was doing a session for $1,500.
It was a work for hire contract, because we're just learning about
hire
that.
contract, which is what you guys were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously I made that decision because it was, he was a cool guy, and I liked, some of the music he was doing, and it was $1,500 for like 3 hours, but I considered, taking him to court and trying to prove that it was my melody or whatever. But, you make that decision when you walk in the room. And I've done a lot of sessions, and there's a lot of work for hire agreements, and sometimes there's not. And I guess I'm not very litigious, so I don't really chase after people if they steal an idea or whatever. But if you work with a guy like Jonathan or with Peter Murphy, you sign a work for hire agreement walking in the door, and anything you do in the studio belongs to them, and you pretty much have to agree to that right away. And then if they're feeling magnanimous, maybe they'll give you a piece of it if it's more collaborative.
I heard a story about I think it was Lenny Kravitz trying to establish that kind of protocol with Ziggy Marley at one point, and yeah, that didn't go over well, apparently.
Yeah.
So I guess it's not always cut and dried what somebody's role is.
Never.
Yeah.
It's never cut and dry, and people come in and state their own terms, and I guess when you're young and coming up, you're not always in a position to state your own terms. You take what you can get, right? I mean, I always did when I was younger. I kind of just walked in, but then, the arrogance comes in and plays its role.
Well, that's something I'd like to hear more about too. And Evan has a question. I want to hear from you, Evan, in a second, but I want to hear more about how you kind of developed the sort of business acumen and the confidence to establish your terms and to have that conversation, and how that has evolved over time for you as you become more mature and more successful. But actually, do you want to address that first, and then we can have Evan's question? Or
Yeah, sounds good. I was going to say, I feel like I care about it less as I get older. Like I've seen a lot of things, so I know a lot of strategies. I know how things are, kind of have an idea of how things are going to go down. And like anything, it's a negotiation. You're kind of playing a little chess with the other person, or a little, having the conversations. Communication is key. You have to have communication. And a lot of times, a lot of my favorite music and art projects haven't paid me anything. You know what I mean? And that's okay too, because it's the experience. And I'm looking to be an authentic creative being, or to have my own voice that's sort of, mine, and feels like that. And like I said, I turned down a lot of gigs, because I'm not right for it. And I'll tell you, I'll be the first one to say I'm not right for this. But I'll sit in the room and light your joints or something, like maybe that'll be cool. Vibe tech, Great question.
pay attention, kids. All right, Evan, you have a question?
Yeah, I was curious about, you were talking about the wide range of gigs you were taking on, whether it's Hot 97 Summer Jam, or kind of like you were naming a couple artists who I love, who like record with Bill Laswell, and like that sort of stuff, which they're two totally opposite ends of the spectrum. What kind of, I imagine that you get satisfaction from both, because obviously you're still doing what you love and you're making a living from it, and it's working out for you. But what fills your cup? Like, is it any one of these gigs individually? Is it them all together? Is it something that you loop in your bedroom by yourself and nobody ever hears? What keeps you going and keeps you inspired to that level?
Evan, I'm going to say the cup is never quite full. And so that kind of really keeps me going. And failure keeps me going. It's like every time I screw it up, or nothing happens, or nobody cares about the loop that I made in my bedroom, then it makes, I kind of just want to go on and do something else. And I honestly, it's hard enough for me to just get up in the morning, get out of bed. And, I need something to kind of keep me going. And I'm sure a lot of you guys feel that way. And a lot of people, artists, people in general feel that way. Sometimes I don't make music at all for a long time, and I get depressed, and it's like, why are you depressed? Well, you're depressed because you're not playing your violin, or you're not making music. Like, that's a simple 10-minute fix, right? Just do the thing that you love. And as far as, all those...
A lot of resistance, though, sometimes, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like that motivates us, it's like the discomfort. You know what I mean? I'm just like constantly I'm just not comfortable. I don't feel, I feel weird around people, things like that. It keeps me motivated to do stuff. At least I'm the guy who can get up and just make something up off the top of his head and feel, okay about it, feel good about it. And yeah, as far as working in other areas of the industry, I mean, it's part of that's just where I was and who I knew. But I love hip hop music. I love dub and experimental music and hard rock music and industrial music, and jazz, and a lot of things that I really love. And so, working in hip hop and with radio people was just kind of obvious step, and I've been involved with the trade unions and with people who are professional production people. And I like to use my communication skills to, bring people together and sort of organize for fair treatment of, workers and artists and conditions and stuff like that. And so that's something that I care about. So it's creative for me to get involved in that sense too. It's all part of, it's like a mosaic of energies.
I sometimes talk about that navigating the business scape as an artist is an art form unto itself. And that, everybody wants to complain about it, but like, go back to, to Michelangelo painting the Sistine Chapel, right? Like he was not, from what we know, he may not have been such a devout Catholic. He may not have been even an acceptable person in the eyes of the Catholic Church, right? And he was also crazy uncomfortable up there on the scaffolding, painting upside down on a ceiling. And yet that work of art, he did the gig, you know,
Right.
and then we know him for it, and look how beautiful it is, you know, all that stuff.
And I'm sure people thought he was nuts. I
Yeah.
feel like every time I take on something new, like I feel like people are doubting it, or I could be just making it up. It could just be the internal voice, my own head telling me like, oh, you're crazy. It's never going to work. You know, and I feel like a lot of great ideas and a lot of successful ideas started that way. And, you know, I think working on dealing with the fear of taking a risk, you know, and not just to, even if you were, you know, a day trader or something like that, and you're playing the stock market, you're taking risk, you're a gambler. You want to be a musician and get in a van and go play gigs, or you want to be a painter or an actor or dancer or something like that. I mean, that's a huge, huge risk. I mean, I worked with this great drummer, Mark Slitsky, and he, you know, was talking about music school and how many years, you know, and he's like, you know, man, we could have been accountants, you know, and like I'd have a really good like retirement fund now and stuff
For
like that.
5 years and you're done, right?
Right. Like you did enough schooling to be an accountant or a dentist or something like that, you know, to be a musician. So when you do it, it's a passion. You're following your heart.
Seth, I wanted to ask you about moments of inspiration in your career, like with all this tumultuous craziness going on in the world now, like has there been a time when something's happened where it's really inspired you, that kind of stands out over time in your mind?
Yeah. I'm always looking for it, but you know, I guess it strikes you unexpected, you know. I lost my mother, 2013 unexpectedly. And, there was a lot of pain and a lot of problems, but there was a burst of creativity there for a minute. That was cool. It was good, cathartic, I suppose. You know what I mean? Something like that, death. You know, 9/11 was cathartic for me too. You know, I was in my studio, which was in Newark, New Jersey at the time. And, you know, I saw airplanes hitting buildings, and, you know, things devolved very quickly in our loft space and with the people around us and stuff like that. But I made some amazing music like right after that. Yeah. So yeah, I think with me, I'm sure everybody's different, right? I don't get, like, when I'm super happy and having a great time, I don't really write songs. You know what I mean? I like live the life of leisure and laziness because I'm a lazy person. Like I just want to chill, really. But I'm so uncomfortable. I have to work.
Yeah, maybe that's the time, right? When you're most uncomfortable is when you're most productive, right?
I never thought about it, but now that you've pulled it out of me, yeah, that's what it is. It's like pain and suffering are the parents of inspiration.
Well, it's anytime we feel strongly about something, and unfortunately, happiness is fleeting. So we can feel strongly about, you know, we can be strongly happy. It's usually for a very brief amount of time, sometimes not long enough to write a song. Whereas we could stay unhappy for a long time.
Yeah,
That's fodder right there, you know.
But there are those great songwriters who just have this happy stuff, and I guess great songwriters translate it all, you know. And Bob Marley or Paul McCartney or something, like they've got the whole spectrums, you know.
Yeah, Bob Marley is singing real happy music, but I feel like bombing a church.
Yes.
Because the preacher is lying, right? But
Bob,
he sounds happy. He sounds happy, but that's not a happy thought.
Yeah, no, Bob is like, he'll make you feel really good, and then about something that's super heavy, you know, and like not necessarily good. And that's beautiful. That's spiritual, really. And Bob Dylan does the same thing with songwriting. Incredible. And
to me, the people whose songs are the most compelling are the ones who tell you what you don't want to hear just as much as they tell you what you do want to hear. Right?
yeah,
Just when you think they're putting a bow on it for you, right? They take the bow off and it's just a pile of rock, a jar of pebbles or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like whatever it is, like they make sure there's a stark reality underlying whatever positive, thing in there.
Yeah, it's amazing. And that's something I've always wished I could do, and I'm not sure that I've ever even touched it. You know what I mean? Like I've spent a lot of time writing songs and singing in bands, and as I get older, I do it less because it hasn't been lucrative for me necessarily. You know what I mean? Like I've had more success just being a live player and, doing some things in the studio, ever than sort of, trying to be John Lennon or anything like that. You know what I mean? Like,
Was that your
don't
initial
try.
impetus? Is that what you wanted to do?
Well,
when you
no,
started out?
no,
No?
not at first. I think at first I just was really into playing and experimental and singing. And then I was like, oh, you have to be a songwriter. So I think maybe I was just kind of forcing myself to write songs. Not saying all my songs suck, but there's just different ways to express yourself. And I've heard people express themselves lyrically with a horn, or a guitar, and it's just as powerful as a great poet. It's the same. And that goes back to the sort of, collaboration or interdisciplinary thing of like, you can actually on your guitar play a painting or a poem.
Well, like we said before, I was repeating something somebody said before, that sometimes 1 and 1 is 2, and sometimes 1 and 1 is green.
Yes. Yes,
Right.
that's dope. I like that.
So we're we can keep talking, but we're approaching the half-hour mark, and I just want to see if any of our participants, especially new people whom I don't know, does anybody have any questions for Zeph or any comments on the conversation that we're having? Please feel free to, you can raise your hand, or for right now, you can just unmute yourself and show us yourself and chime in. We'd love to hear from some other people.
I had one other question for Zeph while we wait for new questions. Zeph, can you tell us a little bit about your early success and how that affected you, and how you dealt with that as a young artist?
Yeah. My experience was, we had a band in the early 90s. It was called Sweet Lizard Ill Tet, and it was like a funk industrial, sort of political art rock band. And for some reason, everybody wanted to sign us. We had offers from every major label, all the major management companies. We were just, jamming industry people into CBGBs. I was 20 years old, I guess, at the time. And that, I feel like we just, and this is our old days, it's different now, but you have to surpass each hurdle in that, getting like the airplay and, presenting yourselves correctly to the marketing people at the label, not blowing all the money on crap, or, choosing the right producers. What's a good mistake we made? One of the first big tours we got on was with the Mighty Boss Tones, and they kicked us off because our roadie, who was like a 17-year-old friend of ours, stole a case of beer out of Dickie's dressing room, things like that, like not having the discipline, sort of to take care of stuff. And I think that's, all those lessons that I learned, I could do it differently now. It'd be easy. It's just tweak it a little bit. And I think the business is so completely different now for a young person, because back then that was the tail end of the traditional record company, A&R, et cetera, model, MTV and all that. But, we took a deal because it was the most money and the most creative freedom. That was a mistake because our A&R person didn't have like the power, but we were like, oh, well, give us money and freedom. That's, that's what we want. I don't care if they push it because it's going to be successful no matter what. And
explain more about that. Yeah. Well, that went by pretty quickly. So the A&R person did have the power to do what?
Oh, so yeah, in a traditional record company situation, like some people are sort of higher up on the food chain and have more influence in the label. So you could get signed by somebody who's doesn't have a lot of influence, or maybe is on their way out and you don't even know it. And they can't really do much for you once you're out there. And like, so why is the marketing arm of Warner Brothers not paying attention to my record? And it's maybe because somebody doesn't like the person that signed you, so, I took that deal with Warner Brothers because there was more money and more freedom. There was more freedom because the guy didn't have any power. The guy I could have signed with at Epic ended up signing Rage Against the Machine after he didn't sign us. And, you know, that very much, not saying that we were, you know, Rage Against the Machine, but we were signed right before them, and the same guy had wanted to sign us. You know, it is what.
And then on the other hand, just as a you know, a counterpoint, I know that Spin Doctors in the early, you know, mid '90s were signed by Epic, and then EMI. Are you sure it wasn't Epic?
No, it was Epic, and it was
Epic
the same.
EMI.
I'm talking about the same A&R person.
Oh, it was the same A&R person.
Yeah, it was Michael Kaplan and Frankie LaRocca. Yeah.
But they got shelved for like 2 years because Michael Jackson's Bad was Epic's main offering at the time.
Right. Yeah. And actually, I remember being at Warner Brothers, and I came up to the office for a meeting, and I saw Rick Rubin, Flea, and Anthony Kiedis, and I met them in a room. And when we left the room, I was like, if they sign these guys, our record's getting shelved. Because that was the time when the funk rock thing was taking off, and the Chili's didn't have a deal, and they had just sold 500,000 records, and everybody wanted them. And I think, you know, my band at that time fell into that category. So we were the Red Hot Chili Peppers of New York at that time. And yeah, so you know, meeting Rick and Flea, and, you know, up at Warner's kind of was like a, you know, a death sentence for us. And it was true. You know, I don't regret anything. I really don't. I mean, you know, I've had a fantastic career so far, and I feel like there's a lot more to do, and I spend a lot more time just making really weird music, and you know, it's what I love.
I just want to go back to you know, it's sort of, this relates to something that we keep going back to, which is that feeling of like, oh, I've arrived. And then the rude awakening of where you've arrived and where you haven't arrived. So, you know, sometimes it's the interacting with somebody. Sometimes it's, you know, you met Rick Rubin in an office. I jumped in a limo with him. You know what I mean? And ended up at a party at the Spy Lounge with him, with Anthony Kiedis and Billy Corgan and all those people. And I thought I was special because I was in a room with those people. But those people didn't know who I was. And I was just there because I was a friend of a friend. And that's cool because I had a friend who was getting in those circles. I think you know her. You know Jen Turner.
Yes, very well.
Yeah, so I actually saw her recently, but so yeah, so you know, she had invited me, and so that's how I ended up in that situation, but you know, even she was in, you know, she was in a major band, a platinum album, blah 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 blah, and assumed that it was basically just all downhill as a snowball of money for the rest of your life and happiness, right?
Yep.
And that's not how it works.
No, that's never true. It's never true.
Not only that, but success doesn't fix a lot of people.
No, I was going to say, even when you do have all the money, and we know, you know, even when you do have all the money and all the success, there's still like a constant. And again, this goes back to sort of just being in pain and being uncomfortable. So I work with somebody who's very famous, and I work with a couple of people that are very famous who are constantly in agony and depressed and in pain and never satisfied with what they're doing. It's really hard. And one of these people in particular has broken all sorts of sales records, and, you know, still what drives him is this sort of yearning and this emptiness and need for it. So it's never enough, you know.
Is he in charge? Is he referred to like as the boss by anybody or anything like that? Is that one of those?
No.
Okay.
No.
Because he Springsteen apparently suffers from also similar depression issues and whatever, you know.
Not surprised. Yeah.
Some of the people who you think are basically like living what the life that you think that you want to are struggling with the same things that we're struggling at, because it's not an economic thing.
Yeah.
It's emotional. It's
a spiritual thing and a mental health thing, actually. You know, I think, you know, meditation has saved my life, and it's a very important sort of key element. And creatively too, if you can learn how to clear your head, it opens it up for more ideas to come in. Because I feel like, you know, genius is not in you or me, it's sort of out there, and you just have to tap into it. You have to sort of, you know, open up the channels to sort of receive it, you know, and then you can have moments of brilliance.
So does anybody, again, from the people whose faces I don't see?
I'm just hanging out. I'm just hanging out with you and Frank right now. We're just sitting.
That's cool, man. Hey, listen, we're having a really cool conversation,
And
and
it's
I'm
been a
loving it.
while.
Yeah, it has. Last I saw you was at that weird building thing that we went to, that Chashama.
Shama.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, look, Elaine's here, and Elaine was at Shashama.
Nice.
Yeah.
Shashama is a great arts organization in New York City that, much like Art for Progress, that, you know, helps out a lot of people and teaching and training and supporting artists. At Shashama definitely has done a lot for us and for Elaine. Hi, Elaine.
Hi.
Go ahead. Elaine and I have worked together a bunch. We worked with Heather Henson, who made giant Muppet flying kite puppets, and we did music for that.
Henson, like Jim, was she related to Jim?
Yeah, it's his daughter.
I guess that's, I mean, I didn't want to assume.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, yeah, it's his daughter.
Very cool. Nice.
That's
Yeah.
another cool
I
example
have a
of,
question myself for you, Zeph.
yeah.
I was wondering, like, because you were talking about it earlier about how, like, at a young age, you guys almost got success to some degree. Like, when you were touring and all that different stuff, just like, what was the expectations that you guys had to like deal with that like as you went through and you like grown and learned that you eventually learned how to like do it right the later on? I don't know if that question made sense. If you want to just try to rephrase that, like, how did you guys learn not to do the same mistakes that you did? Like, did you like what was the first straw? Was like, okay, yeah, let's not do that again. Like, we really fucked up with this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say.
I'm gonna say that since I tour a lot, and I've been touring a lot for decades now, and I have it down, my system, even down to like, you know, what food you're eating, and like, because you gotta have your wits about you and your energy. And I guess, you know, when I was 20 years old and we were just drunk and, you know, going crazy, you know, waking up on a floor somewhere and then going out and doing the show, which was a lot of fun, but, you know, you got to not do stuff like that. You know what I mean? Dumb shit. And then it's like going camping. You know, you got to be prepared. You got to have your water and your flashlight and a lighter, be able to make a lean-to and a fire. You know what I mean? Like, all those kind of things apply to, you know, the touring life. And that's why, I mean, I've gone on to be able to, you know, be on a management level of bigger tours. You know what I mean? So I've done arena tours, you know, with Nicki Minaj, who I worked with for a year and a half, like traveling all over the world and opening for Britney and Lil Wayne and stuff like that. And I just use what I know, what I've learned over the years and the mistakes I've made to make sure that it's smooth for them, you know, in touring. And then, I mean, otherwise you learn from your mistakes. It's very simple, right? You just grow up, you do something like, you walk through a doorway and you hit your head a couple of times. So the third time you duck, or, you know, like to watch your head. You know,
Where your heart at.
where your heart at.
I guess what Jason's asking is what doors have you run into, and yeah, how did what did ducking look like in that situation? You know?
There's so many things, you know. There's so many.
May I remind you of one of them? I remember when you had to build a stage in a certain amount of minutes. It was like some massive stage build that you had to pull down really fast. Was that Britney?
Right. Well, like changeovers and things like that.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? You do that like a like a military operation. Like, you practice it with your stopwatch until you get it right and everybody knows their position, and, you know, do things like that. Training exercises. I mean, we would rehearse. I do a thing in band rehearsal where you practice the transitions in the set. So you have your set, you play the end of the song and the beginning of the next song, and then stop, and then play the end of that song, the beginning of the next song, and do that over and over again until you have very smooth, everybody steps on their pedals, drummer adjusts the snare, whatever, playback changes, a patch. If you're going to have some banter, you're going to try and sell your t-shirts, like practice that. It's a discipline. It's like learn everything you can and practice it and get it right, and then go up on stage and forget it all.
Well, you have to make it automatic. You have to practice it to the point where when you forget, your body and your autonomic nervous system kicks into doing the right thing rather than making a mistake.
Yeah, and I mean, Barry, do you find that also just with learning music, with learning scales and arpeggios and stuff like that, where you just kind of make it so it's automatic?
Yeah, I mean, that's the only reason, to me, that's the only reason to practice anything calisthenic, because I don't want to hear anything calisthenic in your playing. When I hear a guy stringing together things that I can tell that he practiced, or she, a woman, whomever, to me, that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, wow, you really practiced and you're executing all of those ideas that you already had very, deftly. However, I'm not drawn into a story. I'm not intrigued. I'm not engaged. I'm not, convinced of anything. Right? To me, it's like I'm more engaged and involved in somebody who is surprising themselves, where it's clear that they've practiced and they have that vocabulary under their belt and at their command, but that's not the end of the story.
Yeah, and you can really tell it with improvisers. Like, they're cats who are just, obviously playing scale tones or a rehearsed thing. And, there's great sort of, players who, will play the same solo every night. It's kind of like classical musicians or a Broadway musician. Like, you have to play the exact same notes every night. But, I'm more of the mind of, like the solo is going to be different every single night. Same song, same form, but the solo is going to be different notes. It's going to be different, depending on how I feel. And I know Frank Zappa spoke about that. John Coltrane spoke about that. And obviously guys like that, did play that way. And so a lot of people do.
I want to respond to that because we were talking a little bit about sort of the importance and danger of philosophies yesterday. That was our discussion.
Okay.
And I brought up the fact that, like, at one point I got an offer to go on tour with a band as the lead guitar player. And I went and I auditioned. They said, please record, here, they sent me this is back when they had to send you the tape or the CD or whatever physically. And I listened to it and I studied it. I learned the whole thing. I went into the audition and I played it note for note. And they said, okay, great. The tour starts on such and such a date. And we're going to want you to go ahead and learn, this additional, body of material. And, that's going to be your job, is to reproduce these solos, in verbatim every night. And that band was LP, who actually went on to tour and was successful. And I was happy to be offered a gig, and also said no, because I said, well, I don't want to go and play the same solo every night, because I'm not going to grow as an improviser. It's not me. That's not what I want to do. I had just come out of jazz school and all that. And now, Zeph, like, everything that you're saying reinforces my decision. However, I was coming from the perspective of, like, had I spent a year or two on tour with LP, I would have been a legitimate touring musician. That would have been my in the music industry. I would have known what it's like to be on tour, how a band is run, how a tour is run. I would have established relationships with people at venues and in audiences across the country. Like, there were many things that I didn't get by making that decision that was based upon sort of a haughty sense of my own capability, or not even my capability, but of what was valid for me.
Right. That's interesting. First of all, I mean, LP, I kind of dig. I'm sort of, I'm not saying I'm like a big fan. I don't know the music really well, but if I was in your position, I would probably kind of negotiate it, or maybe I'd even just pull something out on the second show and be like, you know what, I'm playing my solo. And like maybe they
That would have been a move.
after
That would have been a move.
I probably would have done it that way because I like LP, but I'd be like, you know what, now I'm gonna slide in a little of this, and you'll see the audience get a better audience reaction. You know what I mean? See, the survey says kind of. And I'm just not good at it. I don't know about you. I mean, you went to jazz school, so you know, I'm sure you had to memorize a lot of melodies and stuff. But man, it's not. I'm just not like playing note for note a solo. Is really difficult for me. I just get so bored of it, you know, and I'm not interested. But that being said, there's plenty of compositional aspects and songs that are fine. And LP would have been cool. I don't know what they were like when it started out, but.
It was probably around 2000, 2001, probably 2000. And I look at it now. Look, as I've said, I don't regret the decision, but I do recognize that it wasn't necessarily a smart one. And
Right.
had I been humbler, I would have possibly been able to sort of be in that role and do what you said and still be able to express myself, even if it was to the extent of playing the solo with
Yeah.
more passion each night, even if it was note for note, you know?
I'm also going to presume that it didn't pay that much.
It probably paid something, but that wasn't that. You know what? I don't even.
Or that wasn't in
I
fact.
don't even remember. That wasn't even important to me at the time. Look how things have changed.
You just
know?
wanted to get out there and get on tour.
Yeah. Well, or not.
Or
I
not.
wanted to get out there and get on tour if I could play what I wanted to play.
Right. Well, good for you, man. You made the decision. You followed your heart, and I understand that because I've made a lot of decisions that, I'm like, shit. Had I done that, I might have more money, or I might have some kind of award on the wall or something. But whatever, it's like.
It makes me think about things differently for sure.
Yeah, and that's what forms us, and I think that's part of the business aspect of being an artist, and. Because the art part has nothing to do with monetization or business. And I can't even approach making my art and thinking of money. I find it really, I'm always impressed with people that do jingles and do advertisement music and, television music and stuff like that. And I have done some of that. And usually it's working with, a producer. I'm usually just a tool in their, or an arrow in their quiver, so to speak. But, yeah, I'm always impressed with people that can kind of just like separate it and make it a business decision. Oh, I'm going to play an A flat. Yeah. Put a chorus on it. Yeah.
This conversation now, and bringing that point up, brings me to think about art school, music school, and how come artists and musicians aren't trained at all in business, in school, right? You're going to school for art and business, you're going to school for art and music, but artists aren't being trained in the business side of it. So they're being left. It's all the creative aspect, but in the real world you have to have both. So why is this a missing part of the equation in the schooling?
I don't know, Frank. You tell us.
Well, hey, we're doing it for the young kids, but I'm talking about college, right? I mean, you're going on to be a professional. I mean, there's a lot of inadequacies in college, right? I mean, I was under the impression when I got out of college, I was going to have this great job, right? But that's not true, right? People go to college and they think, yeah, well, I went to college. All right, where's my job with all the money?
How about
I thought this is why I was going to college.
How about this? My parents thought I was going to learn how to make money in college.
But specifically with this is something that, I've been discussing with Seiji and I've been discussing with Barry, is creating not a school per se, but a curriculum and a mentorship program for artists that provides that aspect for them. And I don't think it's out there. And they haven't had, and artists haven't had that training. So, something we've been discussing, and I think there's obviously value in it to even have that discussion. But
yeah, I haven't been in the academic scene in a while, but I remember going to New England Conservatory, and there was nothing that had anything to do with business at all. Like there's just nothing. It was philosophy, poetry, art. They had all sorts of weird minors you could get into. Yeah, you should have, and maybe Berkeley does by now have some music business classes, but you should understand basic contract law. You should know how to do some accounting because you really, once you're running a studio or you're on tour, you have to do budgets and you have to do accounting. And I'm sure you could learn in 2 semesters everything you need to know to handle that. And then furthermore, then you have marketing and promotion, social media platforms, computer literacy, stuff like that. Sounds good, man. I don't know why that hasn't been a thing. And like I said, it's been years since I've stepped foot in a classroom, but yeah, I think, you know, there's a lot of things, and I always wish I knew more about the law, you know, just in general. And I've, you know, even when I was on here 2 weeks ago, you guys were talking a lot about copyrights and copyright laws and performing rights organizations and publishing. And it's a little complicated, and it's worth schooling yourself on that.
Pretty
Actually-
mystifying, especially that's continuously in flux. Sorry, Seiji, what'd you say?
Yeah, actually the university I went nearly 12 years ago, Liverpool Institute for Performing Arts, where Paul McCartney established that school. I went to the arts management course rather than as a music class, and we did quite heavy marketing, digital marketing, accounting, and entertainment law, specifically intellectual properties, and also the contract on touring. But the thing was that the people who are in that course were not musicians. They are
Right.
mainly people who are interested in managing people. So there is still a divide between music students, per se, as well as the people who want to actually be in the music business industry. And even as a student, I saw the gap between them.
True. And it makes sense because it is sort of a different headspace. You know what I mean? There's very few of us that are really good at both of those things. You know what
I
I mean?
ask you a question, were they teaching the 360, the whole 360 version of contracts now, or was it?
It was a little bit more direct, not 360, but it was mainly one-to-one contract.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, it's funny because I've seen-
Also, as a young person, I wasn't so into the contract all too much. So.
Evan has a question. His hand is raised. I think I saw that. So, Evan, if you want, you can ask
Well,
that question.
it's less so a question. It's more of a statement because I'm going to go ahead and say that I think I might be a little up to date on how music business education has evolved in, let's say, the last 10 years or compared to 10 years ago or even 20 years ago when, you know, Barry was getting out of school or whatnot. And Emilio, you mentioned Berkeley classes. They do have Berkeley classes for all these things. They have Berkeley online classes for all these things. The main issue being there's a paywall. There's a decent paywall, you know? If you can afford a $1,500 course, you're not going to get that knowledge unless you are really good with Google, really, really good with it. And you somehow already know what is misinformation and what is inadequate information by, you know, just Googling, which is almost an impossible expectation to have for, especially an artist, you know, in 2020 to, you know, educate themselves that way. So to what Frank is saying about how there is kind of no curriculum for this, you know, they're ready to show you how to, you know, do everything except the work you have to do outside of your art, you know, the administrative and the paperwork and the bureaucratic and, you know, the negotiations and the contracts and the legal. It's not the fun part. It's not the sexy part, but it's the part that you actually have to learn. You can teach yourself how to play scales and, you know, feel what you're playing, but it's really hard to teach yourself, you know, copyright law. You know, it's not quite the same. And I think that a lot of people who would be in positions to help younger people are not in positions where they can tell you what to do. They can tell you what not to do. This is a mistake I made. This is how I lost this opportunity. You know, you discussed being a work for hire earlier and having them use one of your improvisations as a main motif for one of their recordings. That's, whether you consider it a mistake or a learning opportunity. We were talking earlier about works for hire, and I brought up Bernie Worrell and how he got kind of effed out of, basically a lifetime of royalties because of work for hire contracts and whatnot. And just like you said, I said earlier, you might be inclined to take it because, hey, I'm getting paid to do work, and, this is a cool person, and, we're working together. But again, there's endless pitfalls, especially now that it's easier than ever to create art, distribute it, and promote it yourself, and you can totally DIY it. But if you do it yourself, you take on all the responsibility, all the mistakes, all the pitfalls. If we do it ourselves, if it's a collective effort, if there is a musical mind, a production-oriented individual, a marketing-oriented individual, and then a logistics-oriented individual, or they can even be 2 or 3 in one if necessary. But ideally, it's not there. There shouldn't be a disparity between, or an artist shouldn't feel discouraged to educate themselves. It's kind of like when a comedian is worried about getting sober because they think they won't be funny anymore or something like that. Yeah. Educating yourself as an artist in the business aspect of things will not make you less creative. And it's not going to be taking away time from things you should be doing or would be doing. It's actually about making that time for yourself so you're not cheating yourself through basically ignorance. Ignorance is basically the excuse of like, I didn't know, so I couldn't know better.
Evan, I just want to say quickly, I know a few artists that refuse to pay attention to business, and they usually get freaked out when they see numbers, or like the tour manager turns around and says, actually, you can't afford, to go to the thrift store today or whatever. For me, it's like, I was, oh man, well, I'm in the studio, I can't pay attention to this. We have people around us, if you're getting any kind of money coming in, if you got any kind of that kind of success, you'll have your accountant and lawyer and manager and management team and people like that. But I always found, like, if you're not watching it and you're not paying attention to what's going on, somebody's going to steal from you, and I've seen it happen time and time again. And it's really important to be aware, like you said. And I think in 2020, it's really important to be the authentic artist and to find your voice and to know what's going on and to see the changes that are happening, because our industry is changing massively all the time. And it's going to be different in 5 years and different in 10 years, and that's coming. And I don't, the only ways I've been able to make money at all is mostly live, performance and some advertising, because that's who has money and that's who's paying for stuff. Thank you. Franklin got a hand up?
I think Barry raised his hand as well.
Oh no, I'm just saying that, like, Zay, I said Zay, excuse me. Zeph, sorry. Everything you're saying is like I'm resonating with so like hard, and Evan is kind of part of my music community circle, and I come from the type of musicians that kind of just like finish a project and upload, and just we thrive on the release. And I'm starting to realize, as I further myself into this career and this lifestyle, that you're right. The times are changing. The money is going into different places, and I'm actually seeking that knowledge now, along with, like you said earlier, like Evan said earlier, excuse me, running scales. We didn't get that practice in college. Like, I went to school for music recording technology. No classes on business, no classes on how to go about releasing an album, and I'm just getting that knowledge now. So I really appreciate you guys going into that. Really, thank you.
All right. So as we wrap this up, I just wanted to bring up, one other thing to realize, and one thing so these people that are involved and knowledgeable in music business, and I'm not throwing subs, Evan, but I'm talking to you, also need to realize that for artists, monetary success is not the only currency. In fact, it's not. In terms of survival, it's very important, but it's often not the most important currency. And this is why some artists actually live a whole lifetime without actually achieving any kind of success. And I'm not suggesting that, and I don't think it's a sustainable way to be. But I am saying that artists are, you know, like Zeph said, are invested in authenticity, are invested in pushing the envelope, are invested in having a new experience each time. They're invested in being part of the legacy and the history of what they're doing, standing on the shoulders of the people before them. So it's not that artists don't care or are too cool or too aloof to be involved in business. It's that in order to keep true to the art, sometimes business needs to be relegated to not being the primary thing that they think about. But obviously, if you're not aware, you're going to get taken advantage of. So in every situation, you know, we all have to sort of temper that and balance those things.
But
I just want to add that it has to do with the creative process too. Like if your process involves turning off the phone and, you know, like burning a certain kind of incense and, you know, like then that's what you have to do to make your, you know, your art. And sometimes you have to just shut out the outside world. And, you know, that's part of it too. You know, that's part of the thing, your rituals, you know, that open you up to the realms of creativity.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Zeph. That was really very cool talk, and we learned a lot from that and got a lot of new insights into, you know, it's just amazing to me. Each one of the guest artists that we have, the conversations that we have are, even if the person wasn't, and you were here, I know, during some of the other sessions, but even if the guest hadn't been in part of any of the conversations, it seems as though this is a living, breathing conversation that we all as artists are having, and this is just a forum where we're sort of letting it out and stating it and giving each other an opportunity to comment about it. And it's really very validating for me, because this was sort of, you know, Frank and I were like, okay, well, we're going to do something online. Like, what are we going to offer? What are we going to talk to? It's very different than in person, where you can help somebody learn how to play a guitar chord or whatever. And not that you can't do that on Zoom, but we realized that there was something else that we were trying to accomplish or that we ought to focus on. And it's just, thank you again for reinforcing a lot of things that we've been talking about and giving us new perspectives on them.
Yeah, I'd like to know what the common themes are that have been running through this whole series of presentations.
Well, authenticity.
When you guys are done.
First thing that you mentioned was authenticity, right? Being true to yourself as an artist. Recognizing that not everybody is going to love you, but it's up to you to improve yourself and to seek, like, to grow and to achieve mastery and to push yourself, and that you're your own, you have to sort of be the gauge of your own, you know, success or failure or progress. And also another common theme is something else that you said, is that being versatile, looking at yourself as your life as an art form, and that everything that you do is in order to sustain and make a place for you to be able to do your chosen medium. But the reality is that adaptability is going to be your friend if you want to have a sustainable career. So all those things, I think, are things that we've been talking about and that you added to that conversation.
Right on. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
man.
you.